Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Close Encounters podcast. As always, we'll kick off with a small selection of weird and interesting news with That's What I Call News. And then hot on the heels of my news segment is my interview with Digger Wordsworth from Southampton in England. In this episode we'll be talking angels and how he came to communicate with them and his book My Kind of Angels. And then finally we'll end up with information on the upcoming NIUFOS open day and the upcoming celestial events of the week ahead. But let's not ramble on and let's get straight into That's What I Call News. Let's just bring that slider down there. That's what I call news. It's my selection of the more interesting, weird and paranormal news from around the world. Let's see what we've got for you in this episode. So, if you were born in the 80s like me, then you've probably noticed the decline of Christianity across Western nations. But according to Caleb Strom of AncientOrigins.net, paganism is seeing a steady rise. So according to his article, Germanic, Nordic, Slavic and even Celtic paganism are seeing a comeback, and a community in Iceland will soon finish the construction of the first temple dedicated to Odin and Thor in over a millennium. So after Denmark completed theirs in 2016, it seems that there will be more temples being erected to commemorate the gods of yore, it seems. Is this a case of history repeating itself, though, or are people seeking to fill, a spiritual void in their lives? Either way, it's interesting to see old traditions making a comeback across their native lands. Let's see what we've got at science.org. Humans appear to have mastered archery in the year 52,000 BC. Anyone who is familiar with Graham Hancock will know his catchphrase, "Stuff just keeps getting older." And it appears that humans had mastered the art of archery in the year 52,000 BC, an incredible 54,000 years ago. American and French anthropologists recently unearthed hundreds of stone points used to make arrowheads in a valley in southern France, which rewrites our previous idea that early humans in Europe, first used bows and arrows approximately by 40,000 years. It's a massive shift in our paradigm of understanding when early humans would have been using archery as a form of weaponry and hunting. So the evidence suggests that the arrowheads were left by Homo sapiens at a time when Neanderthals still dominated that part of the globe. Now this really shouldn't come as a surprise to us, because if the works of Graham Hancock are anything to go by, this just seems to be the new norm. If you're not familiar with his work, I would highly recommend checking them out, particularly his book, Fingerprints of the Gods. Fascinating read, very in-depth read, and I've only got part of the way through it, probably about halfway-ish. There's a lot to take on board, but again, it's still interesting information that everyone needs to know. Let us go over to popularmechanics.com, where 8 mysterious signals have been reported to have been detected by a specially designed algorithm. A team at the University of Toronto have designed an algorithm that's already detected 8 signals of interest from 5 different stars between 30 to 90 light years away. The algorithm, which is designed to filter out interference and Earth signals, detected the signals recently, specifically seeking out deep space signals which are likely to come from a technological source rather than a natural one, such as flaring stars or quasars and things like that. The team, however, are remaining cautiously optimistic, saying that while the signals aren't likely to be from an extraterrestrial civilization, they can't completely rule it out. They're now waiting to see if more signals come from these stars, which would lend more weight to the possibility of these signals originating from an intelligent species. Interesting stuff indeed, and let's finish it off by coming back to the island of Ireland, where over 40 UFOs have been documented firsthand by a leading Irish astronomer in Roscommon. This is coming from the irishmirror.ie. Astronomer Dr. Eamon Ansbro has revealed that over the past 22 years, he has captured 40 unidentifiable flying objects from an array of 11 surveillance cameras designed to filter out planes and birds. He goes on to say that the objects have ranged from triangular in shape to dumbbell in shape. I would imagine even the classical cigar or disc-shaped craft have been spotted as well, but that would be me putting words into his mouth. Dr. Ansbro says that while he accepts that the objects may not necessarily be extraterrestrial in origin, he's very open to the idea that they are. It'll be interesting to see the geographical bedrock, actually, for the local area, to see what kind of rock is there, and what kind of hills there are there as well, because I would suspect that that may have an influence on what's being seen there, if our research in Northern Ireland is anything to go by. As always, links to this and other stories in this episode will be available in the show notes of this podcast. And at that, let's end the news and speak with our guest this evening. So, if you're familiar with NIUFOS, you'll know that one of the principles we were founded on was the belief that the metaphysical links well with ufology. Some entities that may be perceived as spirits, such as demons, astral beings, etc., are well within the remit of ufology, especially when it comes to angels. When biblically described, angels are said to come from heaven, the off-world abode of God or gods. And this guest for this episode has written about his encounters with angelic beings after years of extensive research. Digger Wordsworth, an author and researcher from Southampton in the UK, is joining me. Hello, Digger. How are you?
Hi, Chris. Fine, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on.
No, thank you for coming on. Because, again, a lot of people, whenever it comes to ufology, now, I'm guilty of this whenever, in my early days, I've always believed in spirituality and, the metaphysical side, the ghostly side. I've always believed in the UFO side, ufology side, but I treated them as separate things right up until maybe about 2011. So it's an honor to have you on, because what you talk about and what you've written about links well with ufology. I'm sure you can agree.
Yes, I certainly can. And during the process of writing the book, it did, the subject of ufology um, did come into the conversation. And although I did directly ask them, actually, where are you what we would term as extraterrestrials? Although, in a sense, they are, because they're not on the Earth, so they are extraterrestrial. But in terms that we understand, were they from other planets? And they said no. However, I think there's, with angels and extraterrestrials and species, it's something to do with consciousness. It's something to do with consciousness, where everything is frequency and vibration. As our consciousness evolves, or we are able to vibrate at a higher level, we are able to perceive beings from other realms. However, that's as far as I can understand it. I don't know whether extraterrestrials and UFOs are actually from other planets, physical planets, or if they are, um, you know, beings of light, interdimensional beings. I don't know. All those things are open to me. However, I am absolutely certain that there are higher intelligences that are not necessarily physical in nature, but like the angels, they are um, non-physical beings. They are from a non-physical reality. However, they're just as real as you and I.
I would say that would be the main difference between ufology and the metaphysical side, whereas ufology is quite physical, isn't it? It's the little grey men, the Pleiadians, etc., the UFOs that we physically see. But the metaphysical side, like you said, always refers back to, in your mind, or ethereal sort of thing, which would explain your demonic entities, your angel entities, perhaps, and even some of the interdimensional extraterrestrials. One of the episodes, I think it was the second episode, I was talking to somebody about the Pleiadians, and we sort of spoke how the Pleiadians both sort of branch off into the physical and metaphysical side, the spiritual side of things, where some Pleiadians would need the actual physical vehicle, and the other Pleiadians use the Merkaba to be able to travel astrally and interdimensionally and all that sort of stuff. But let's get straight into it, because I'm quite interested in your work. And before we started recording, we had a conversation where you've wrote a book about all this, and I'll be very interested in getting that, like I've said. So I'll be downloading that to have a read next week. But let's start from the start. How did this journey begin for you?
Well, the book came about as a result of a premonition, really. But for all of my entire life, I've been very interested in the big questions we all ask, I guess. Who am I? Why am I here? What is this about? And I'd had a sort of, I think we all go through periods in our life that are quite difficult. And I was still young at the time, and it was only a minor operation, but I was in hospital. But at that point in my life, I'd experienced quite a lot of, difficulties, divorces, and all the rest of it. I don't want to get personal, but uh, and while I was in hospital, they still had mixed wards during that time, and there was some old ladies that were in the ward, obviously, at death's door, unable to feed themselves or clothe themselves or recognise their family or anything, and it upset me, really, really upset me because what I really wanted to know was, well, is this all there is, or is there more than this? Is there life after? Basically, is there life after death? And it really, really mattered to me to get, and not. I didn't want a religious answer. I didn't want anyone telling me I have to believe this or fry in hell. I just wanted the truth. Just somehow how could I possibly know to my own satisfaction whether or not life after death was a reality? Because if it wasn't, what was the point? I couldn't see the point in life if there wasn't. Yeah. Anyway, I had I don't know if it was the well, I think it was the intensity of my desire to know caused things to happen. And one of these things that happened was I had an out of body experience, which I'd never had before, or I'd never tried to have one, or it just occurred. And while I was out of my body, I was in a state of what I could describe as just pure consciousness. I didn't have another body. I was just uh, consciousness. I was awareness. I was aware of myself and who I was, but I was also aware that everything that outside of me in the room that I was in existed within me, and I existed within it. It was, and since then I've been able to take that further. I think that's everything is there is that is the nature of life. Oneness. There is uh, the universe exists within us, and we exist within the universe, if you like. Anyway, yeah, that sort of I had a sort of journey into spirituality. I had a friend of mine who was killed on a motorbike, um, and for years, and I mean sort of 7 or 8 years, I'd had strange experiences that I didn't understand were related to that um, friend of mine being killed. It wasn't until, like I say, 7 or 8 years later that I'd spoke to a medium who I didn't mention it to. She mentioned it to me. She asked me if I'd known anyone who was killed on a motorbike, and I did say yes. And she said, "Well, you get these, you pick up on these feelings," and I didn't understand what she was talking about. And it wasn't until afterwards I had to think about it but I realised, well, yes, I do have periods in my life where all of a sudden I will have this sort of kind of really strange feelings that would make me sort of angry for no particular reason. And I would hear things, I would hear footsteps, and that was I got so used to it, I just thought it was me. And I met someone else, another medium, who told me the same thing. I was told the same story by two mediums independently of each other who didn't know anything about what had happened. And it made me realise that well, this must be true. Then there must be life after death. Plus, I did get into reading particularly the philosophy and teachings of spiritualism, which was the first thing I'd ever read that made any sort of sense about life. That we are, that as well as human beings, we are the reality of our nature is that we are spiritual. We have souls, and it's our soul that's here to develop and grow. And it's through, you know, unfortunately, through the difficult experience we have that gives us the most sort of spiritual growth. And it kind of made so much sense to me that I really took it on board. I took it seriously, and I lived like that accordingly for all my life, really. However, I always was able to sort of, I always had a habit really of always sort of pride myself on being um, reasonable and a logical type of person, and I kind of kept sort of spirituality in one box and materiality in another box. I'm responsible for my job, I have to earn money and all the rest of it. However, I got to the point, when I talk about sort of 20 or 30, well, probably about 30 years later, where I'd sort of physically and mentally exhausted myself through, sort of trying to find enough money to pay the bills and work and all the sort of normal stresses and strains that we go through. It got me to the point where I was literally physically and mentally exhausted. And I will say I'm not advocating any particular religion or anything like that, but I personally do strongly believe in God. I don't particularly believe in any religion, but I believe that we have a source and we're linked to it. And for me, that's a very important part of life. And when I got to this point, I I sort of just said, well, look, I'm I'm in my mid 50s, mid to late 50s now. I kind of feel like the family's grown up. It doesn't really matter to me anymore whether I stay or go. I was so exhausted. I was just really so exhausted, and I just didn't want to. I thought I just don't. If the rest of my life's going to be like it always has been, I think I kind of feel like I'd like to get off now. I wasn't suicidal as such, but I guess I probably wasn't too far off of it. Although anyway, I just meant it. I really meant it. If you want me to stay, you're going to have to help me because I just haven't got the strength to carry on anymore. And I wasn't exaggerating. I know it sounds pretty dramatic, but it was true. That was the situation I got myself into, really. Anyway, I sort of got myself together a bit and used to work in the building construction industry, and so it wasn't uncommon to have periods of unemployment. And I was unemployed at that time, which didn't help. Anyway, I did manage to get another job, and I got back to work, and it was quite a nice little job I had. I was kind of a groundsman, really, for a sort of big office facilities, and I was struggling physically. I wasn't healthy, but I was sort of earning money again, so I was kind of getting myself together a bit, and I just had the strangest of experiences. One day I was at work, and in front of me, within sort of 20 or 30 yards, it was actually like being in a video game. I watched this crow chase this young blackbird down onto the pavement in front of me, and it, it, it wasn't going to get up, this little blackbird. So I went over to it and I picked it up. And as I picked her up, I thought, well, she didn't seem to, it must be the shock, or her wings don't seem broken, her legs seem okay and everything. So, and I thought, well, what should I do? And there was a big planter there in the middle of the yard. And I thought if I put her in that, she might be, once the shock wears off, she'd be okay. So anyway, as I put this little, she's only a young blackbird, as I put her down into the soil, she was looking at me, and as she looked at me, she just died. I just watched the life go out of her, and as she did, I was hit so hard with a feeling which I couldn't describe. It was just unbearable. I didn't know what it was, and I had to get away from everyone. So I just got to get away from everyone and be by myself for a minute. So I did. I went up onto the roof where all the air conditioning and stuff was. And I just sat there for a while. As I sat there, I just thought to myself, I just knew it. There was no voice or anything, but I just knew without any shadow of a doubt that someone close to me was going to die. I just knew it. I just absolutely knew it with 100% certainty. And I phoned my sister, and I said to my sister, I said, I don't know who it is going to be. I said, but someone is going to die. I just told her. I just told her the story. And I don't know who, what, or when, but I know it's going to happen. Anyway, that sort of, I suppose it must have been about a couple of weeks later while I was at work. The phone rang, and it was my sister screaming and crying on the phone. Mum's just died, just completely out of the blue. No illness, no indication whatsoever. She just killed over and had a heart attack. And it was just, I just knew it. I just knew that it was going to happen, and it did without any indication. I couldn't deny my own experience. Before I'd had experiences, as I think we all do. Actually, I think we all have different times in our life when we experience things that are otherworldly or supernatural or unexplainable. And if anyone like me just dismisses them, but I got that I couldn't dismiss. I just could not dismiss that experience.
It takes somebody to sort of have gone through it to sort of understand how profound and how it actually feels. I mean, like what you say, yeah, a lot of people will probably turn around and dismiss it and what have you, but until they actually experience it themselves, a lot of people are going to be ignorant to it, aren't they?
Yes, yes, and it's I mean it's understandable. We live in a very sort of sort of materialistic, rational world, and when we, you know, if we tend to think that if it doesn't make sense by our five senses, then it can't be real. But of course, that's only just a very small part of who we actually are. You know, our five senses, that is our ego self, I suppose, and but we are much more than this. And that was one of those occasions that it was undeniable. I couldn't deny it. It was just, it would have been ridiculous for me to think, you know, that didn't happen when I knew for. And fortunately, I'd phoned my sister and my sister-in-law were both phoned it at the time, and it gave me the validation that I needed as well. Because if I'd have mentioned it afterwards, it would have just been, oh yeah, well, he's just saying that or something. But it was an actual occurrence that there was no denying it. It was, it was. Anyway, as a result of that, I had to phone um, a friend of mine, like a family friend that we grew up together. But I hadn't seen her for a long, long time. But she was still in touch with my mum, and so I phoned her to tell her. And anyway, sort of, she invited me to. She invited me to go up and stay with her. And because of the way things had been, I kind of felt, well, I could do with a fresh start. I just let everything go. I just let the job go, the flat go, everything, and I just moved up there. And while I was there, she said to me, "Shall we get a Ouija board?" Which I wasn't sort of too keen on initially, really. But as I said, I've had a sort of a whole lifetime with an interest in spiritualism and the sort of esoteric and that kind of thing. So I wasn't afraid of it, but I didn't know whether it was a good idea or not. But I decided, oh, well, why not? Why not? Perhaps it's not such a bad idea. It's didn't really expect anything to happen. So anyway, we did. We sort of we started using it on a regular basis, like a nightly basis, and it was slow initially. There wasn't kind of we were very sort of careful to ask for protection. We weren't reckless with it. I believe all these things are to do with intent. As I said earlier, I think it's your intent that dictates the results that you get. Which is why people are very wary of Ouija boards. I think that's Ouija boards, and I think that's a result of The Exorcist, the movie. Because interestingly enough, in 1967, prior to The Exorcist being made, the Ouija board outsold Monopoly as a board game in
I remember
America, which
hearing
is
that, yeah. An interesting board game.
yeah, this is like incredible. So it's got a lot of bad press, but anyway, we tried it, and like I say, we sort of didn't have too much success to start with, but it didn't take long. It was only over a period of a few sort of evenings that it began to sort of get there was something happening. We both knew that it wasn't us doing it. We was we you could tell there's just a feeling that you get that well, this isn't us, and some of the words that were coming out, or the way the words were coming out weren't the way we either of us speak. You think, well, that's really not what's happening here. And I would get fascinated because some of the things that were being said was things that I'd thought about during the day that I hadn't said to anyone. It was just a path of thought that I'd had, and they would bring it up in conversation. And it was just incredible. It was really, there was no doubt whatsoever, and there still is no doubt whatsoever that we were in contact with a non-physical reality, whether you call it interdimensional or whatever. but it was real, and it was an intelligence, and it was. I couldn't actually accept it at first. It took me quite a long time to, what is happening? What? And I did say to him, I said, you're going to have to sort of ex- explain to me who you are, because they was sort of, it wasn't like, this, we are spirits, someone that lived here 100 years ago, or it wasn't like that at all. Anyway, this is when it came out that they said that they were angels, and that there was a purpose, that they deliberately had, well, chosen me was the word they used, which I felt a bit awkward about. Because what do you mean chose? Who chose me? Why? What? uh, but it became apparent that the purpose of it was, they wanted me to demonstrate to the physical realm the reality of the spiritual realm. They said to me that, we know that you've held such strongly, you have such strongly held beliefs that you've held for such a seriously long period of time, and we want you to explain to people why. And the reason for that is because, as I say, we are spiritual beings, which means life is eternal. We don't die, and when we die, it's our consciousness just goes to the next dimension, and the next realm. And too many people arrive there unprepared, and this was the whole point of why they wanted me to write the book, which is um, basically what it's about. It's not about, there's no sort of thou shalt nots or anything like that. It's all to do with just just to demonstrate the reality of the spiritual realm, that there is more to life than material existence.
And I profoundly believe that there is as well. And I've seen more than enough evidence for it. Whether it's kids on the news or in local papers recounting past lives to such an exact detail that they shouldn't even understand. Like in the last episode, I used the Titanic one, where there was a little boy from America somewhere. Whenever there was something being shown, a documentary on the sinking of the Titanic, and a picture come up of the boiler rooms, and he said, "Well, that's not the Titanic. That those boilers are on the wrong side. It should be on the other side of the picture." And things like that prove to me that there's definitely life after death, and all the ancient texts and the ancient wisdom and religion sort of point towards that. But sticking with the ancient text side, that brings me neatly onto my next question, actually. Are these angelic beings the same kind spoken of in ancient texts, such as the Bible?
Well, yes, I think so. But I mean, because the Bible does mention the angels a lot, doesn't it? There's a lot of talk about the angels.
Yeah.
And they were, although I don't think it's necessarily, the way it's conveyed in the Bible is necessarily how it actually is. I mean, there's one of the that, because I for all the sort of interest in spirituality I'd had over my life, I hadn't really paid too much attention to angels, and I said that, and they said to me, well, that they called me Digger. They said that hurts, Digger. It was quite, there was a lot of humour in our conversation. It wasn't as if it wasn't stoic or anything like that. It was very relatable, especially as it went on. It became more and more relaxed, and uh, and I did sort of say, I was, I mean, I'm not, I said, look, well, if ever I do look into angels in the Bible, it kind of puts me off. I mean, it's like all this, smiting and killing, and I just not, And they said to me that you don't need to, don't accept everything you read. I said, well, no, I don't. I wouldn't be here talking with you if if I did. So I think, I think it's sort of, in essence, is correct, but I think, um, it's a lot more loving than the Bible would perhaps have us believe. But again, that's a translation of a translation of a translation of the
I
Bible.
was
So,
just going to say that. Yeah, it's a lot
but
of
yeah,
Chinese whispers in written form, I suppose. So a lot of the times in the Bible, the angels are always said to be in contact with different people. That's how they, sort of communicate with prophets and what have you. But whenever you're in contact with them, do you see them physically, or is it purely visionary?
Well, I did have one occasion. They told me that I had seen one, but I couldn't remember it, and so that kind of frustrated me. But I did have one occasion. I went to bed. I was about to go to bed one night, and I turned off the lights, and the instant that I turned the light off, there was a about a tennis ball size light on the ceiling, and it was absolutely real, glowing, and I was watching it, and I must have been for like 30 seconds or a minute. I was just looking at this sphere of light, and I'm quite nervous about it really because I this is I'm not imagining this. I'm stood and I could feel that the light switches were all off. I don't know why I thought it was a light, as in an electric light, but I just wanted to be, I was at the presence of mind to check, and I knew that there wasn't even a light bulb in the rooms, but because it was pitch black dark, I was just trying to sort of rationalise things, and, and it was there for about 30 seconds to a minute, like I say, I think. I mean, it might have been longer, I don't know, but and then it just faded out, and I was sort of trying not to be freaked out by it, to be honest, because it was like, it's not something you see every day. And I did ask them about that. I did say and they said yes, it was an angel. Unless, from as far as I understand it, sometimes that's how they appear first. They do appear as a light, and then they can open up to. And well, they are beings of light. That's how they describe themselves. They are beings of light. So so yes, but that was the only occasion that. However, as and I would urge everyone to look for signs, things like feathers. Feathers can appear in the strangest places,
Yeah, I've heard
or
that
at the
theory.
strangest
Yeah.
moments that you think, well, where did that come from? And they do give us signs, and they will not intervene in any way whatsoever unless it's a dire emergency, without us asking. And that's what they wanted to do. Again, that was one of the purposes of the book, was because they want people to ask asking for engaging conversation with them, and you will get a response. It's very easily dismissed as coincidence or something, but we mustn't do that. We must, we accept that they are kind of there to guide us. They do. There is, like we talk about in the Bible, that angels, but they are there. It's all about love. It really, truly is. They are, they love us, and they are here to help us in our lives. And they know the difficulties we all have. They don't judge us in any way. They want us to, evolve as far as we can spiritually while we're here. We're all here for a purpose, and they want to work with us. And by communicating with him, they do respond. They will respond. I look upon angels as God's emissaries. They are sent by God, angels, and uh, because Peter, that's something else. People will get, oh, you shouldn't pray to angels. You should only pray to God, and all the rest of it. Well, okay, but you can still talk to them. They are, I consider them to be friends. I really do consider them to be, like angelic friends that we all have. And they are really, they are real. I always sort of think that, although we consider ourselves as being, physical beings, when we think about it, the most of what we are is non-physical. Our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, none of our consciousness, none of that can be, measured. And it's that is what the reality of life is. It is non-physical. The body, the mind is just something we have. The essence of what we are, our awareness, is non-physical, and it doesn't make us any less real. And it's the same with the angelic realm and the spiritual realm.
I mean,
So these things
I would
are
totally
very,
agree with that. Yeah, definitely. The like the radio waves that our radio can pick up. Just because we can't physically see them doesn't necessarily mean that it's not there, that it's not real, because it clearly is, And it sort of takes me on to my next question. Sort of makes it redundant, actually, because we've said that these angelic beings are somewhat different from what were mentioned in the Bible, in the sense that these ones are astral, or they're beings of light, and not described as and not as described in the Bible as physical. So I would presume then that when it comes to ufology and like that, they sort of transcend the need for a physical vehicle or vessel to travel about. It would be more maybe just using their minds, perhaps. Or I've heard the theory before where the astral beings would use the Merkaba to be able to travel both physical and astrally.
Absolutely. I come to that conclusion myself, that it is all consciousness. It's all consciousness. I mean, I don't know, but I have read that, they describe some of these uh, craft, these interdimensional craft, as being um, pure consciousness, or related to the consciousness of the entities controlling them. And as I say, it's really beyond my understanding. But I do think that resonates with me, that it's all to do with consciousness. I kind of think that everything is mind. I think everything is mind, and we all exist within that mind. We are minds within the mind, kind of a fractal type thing, really. And life isn't just limited to human life. I'm sure there's uh, life throughout the universe, and also it, it's probably a multiverse. I look upon the angels as celestial beings. They are um, they're kind of like highly evolved. I mean, but it does say that in the Bible, doesn't it, about that they were created slightly higher than humans, and they
Yeah,
are human like, but they're not. You can tell they're not human. More, it's kind of purer. I think it's a kind of um, uh, a pure consciousness. That's one of the things they said to me
I
about just
suppose
having a pure heart.
they would have to be, because if they're in the presence of the God that's mentioned in the Bible, where um, anything that is sinful cannot be in His presence. Hence the sort of the religion around Christianity, where you need to be forgiven in order to be and blessed by the name of Jesus in order to be able to enter heaven, to be in God's presence, I suppose. So that does make a lot of sense as well. Um, Another question that come to me, actually, because again, I have whole load of questions wrote down just in case I do need them, but I never do, because the conversation is always good, and I always get questions that pop into my head. And another one that's just popped into my head, just randomly. What was the most profound or perhaps strangest encounter you've had with these angels?
Oh, well, there's been several, and one which I wish I had my phone on me at the time was, I decided that I was going to pack up and move, because where I went was a few hundred miles from where I was living at the time. And before I went to uh, visit a friend of mine who lived locally. And when I arrived outside his house, there were feathers literally blanketing not only his lawn, it's like a little council estate he lived on, and the whole road, left and right, as far as I could see, every front lawn was blanketed in feathers, just
Wow.
white feathers. And I couldn't work it out where they come from. It wasn't just, as if a duvet had burst or something. It was like snow, uh, and that was peculiar. Actually, that happened before I'd had any sort of contact or conscious contact with the angels. So that's something that I look back on. I think that was kind of, very very strange.
Sort of makes me think of
And
that
I,
Mr. Bean episode where he drives into the back of the truck when he's rolling down the hill, and then there's just this massive blast of feathers that come out of the back of the truck. But I'm sure from what you're describing, there was a hell of a lot more feathers than just that.
Yeah, it was like I say, all the way up the road, and I would say we're probably talking, 10, 15, 20 houses left and right. The whole garden, they weren't big gardens, they were only small gardens, but nonetheless, it must have been millions. It must have been millions of feathers. And I don't know how they got there or anything. And at the time, it struck me as strange, but I couldn't work what had happened there, and I still can't. And because I didn't have my phone on me. I wish I really now. I didn't have. I left it. I remember leaving it at home, and I just, why did I leave it, or why didn't I go back or something? Like I say, it was a bit of a strange time because my mum had just passed away, and I wasn't in sort of, those sort of very difficult times. I was not quite myself, but I kind of regret now. I said, why didn't I go back and just but there's been any number, and I think that that's why I always encourage people. The angels themselves want us to do it. I mean, I did have because one of the things that they say look for is repeating numbers, and I did have a sort of a wobble at one point. I thought, I don't, it's just sort of rationality kicks in. Like, what am I doing? And I sort of had a sort of doubts about things. And I walked up the road, and two cars, both with the number plate 333, or both had 333 in their number plate, pulled out in front of me. And you think that's that's just. I mean, you could say, oh, it's a coincidence, but what are the chances? But I think thinking about what you said, I was staying. The person I was staying with, like I say, we grew up together, and her sister, who was a similar age, she passed away within, I don't know, sort of a year or two of us having the angel contact. She had cancer, and I dreamt about her one night. Always, but it was such a clear dream that I couldn't. It's one of those dreams, that real lucid dream, that I thought, was that just a dream, or was she paying me a visit? And it was so strange because she looked nothing like she did before she passed. She was looking extremely well, and I was chatting with her as if it was an everyday occurrence. It just didn't have any sort of, there was, until I woke up and realised, oh, that was really a strange dream. Anyway, like I say, I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I was driving home from work that evening, and I thought to myself, well, I'm going to ask the angels. I was going to say, and I said to them that if that was actually Caroline paying me a visit now, can you show me the number 444 on a number plate before I get home? And I don't normally sort of get that specific. I don't very often even ask for signs anymore because I'm absolutely certain in their reality of their existence. Anyway, within 100 yards, I pulled up at a roundabout, and waiting at the next exit to pull out was it was a Range Rover, I think, with the number plate something 444, and it was exactly the number I'd asked them to do, to give me as a sign. And it was to me, that was just absolute confirmation. What were the chances? The number that I asked them to show me as confirmation, I would see within seconds.
I mean, it is. I can relate to the repeating number thing because I get my repeating number is always 2222. I could be just sitting in my room reading something or doing something, and then I just happen to glance up at the clock or even the corner of my phone, and you always see 2222. My friend and colleague, who is from Ballynahinch, actually, she's working with me in England as well, with the same job as a drone pilot, and she's recently got into spirituality, and she gets repeating numbers as well. So I can definitely relate to that 100%. And if anyone else does get repeating numbers, I would suggest that you go look up online or ask somebody like Digger here to see perhaps what the number could actually mean. But Digger, we're slowly running out of time, and I've got just a couple more questions I'd like to ask you. The angels that you speak to and that you are in communication with, it sounds like that they've got a task for you which you're executing quite well. Do they have an ultimate message for humanity? And if so, can you tell us?
It's I think there's two things really. I think it's they want us to be aware that we are our nature. We are spiritual in nature. There is a spark of the divinity within all of us. God is within all of us. We are all an aspect of God. We are all one. There's enough for everyone. That's that's the one thing, and I think that's what they want us to put us in touch with who we truly are. That we all within us have this perfected self, this inner being, higher self. It's God consciousness, I think, is the best way to describe it, and that we are uh, eternal, and that that life is all one. We are all part of the same thing.
Definitely. I mean, it even says in not just the Bible, but other ancient texts as well from around the world, that continents apart, that we were created in the image of God or the Creator or spirit consciousness, etc. And I even believe that as well. Just the last point to clear up, Digger, is you've got a book. And from recording, we haven't actually mentioned the name of the book yet, which is My Kind of Angels, Evidence of a Higher Realm. And there is no doubt that within your book, there's a lot of useful information in there. And I am hoping, just like myself, there are other people as well who are now listening to this thinking, I would like to get my hands on that and have a read. Where can we find your book and where can we find you?
Well, I'm in Southampton. I don't have a website or anything. I'm kind of a bit of a technophobe, but my book is available 24/7 on Amazon. It's available on Kindle. It's only 2.99, I think it is on Kindle, and it's also available on paperback on Amazon. Priced at £7.77. So it's affordable, and it's very. I always stress to people that every single word in that book is absolute truth. There's nothing exaggerated or made up, or it wasn't written in order to, um, you know, to make money. Really, it's written because it's to convey the message that I was asked to convey, which is so important for all of us. It doesn't, we all of us get caught up in so much that doesn't matter. The truth is that we are spiritual beings. We are divine in nature. Life is all about love, and that's the only thing that's going to matter when our time comes. The only thing that's going to matter is how we lived our lives and how we were to each other. That it is the only thing that will prevail is love. Everything else passes, but love prevails, and that's all it is. It's we just they just want us to wake up to the reality of the spiritual dimension, which as they say, it's inevitable. When the inevitable occurs, we will realise, and they'd like us to realise before that happens. And prepare ourselves for what's to come. It's kind of like I guess it's kind of like you know uh, if you don't learn your lessons at school, you're not going to pass your final exams, and I guess that's similar to what it is like. We are here in preparation for the afterlife, so we can if we can look beyond the material and just focus on what matters instead of what doesn't really matter, then we'd be happier and the world would be a better place.
You can certainly tell that it is a very noble cause that you're on, and a very truthful cause as well, because again, it does sound like that you're honest in getting your message out there, and not some of the people who would be on a lecture circuit somewhere just trying to make a quick buck. Digger, thank you very much indeed for coming on. That was a fantastic chat with you. Yeah, we had a little bit of an interruption in between because the girlfriend's dogs had decided that they were going to bark at the mailman, but hopefully I can edit that bit out. But Digger, again, thank you very much indeed for coming on to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
What an interesting conversation that was indeed, and certainly opened my mind to what angels could actually be, not necessarily being the extraterrestrial servants of an extraterrestrial god or gods from biblical times. There could actually be interdimensional beings as well. But one thing is for sure, I will be researching this a little bit more, just to sort of broaden my understanding of who angels are and what they might actually be. Again, a big thank you to Digger Wordsworth from Southampton for joining me on that episode today. Let us move on to the NIUFOS Open Day details, because we've now finalised the plans for that because of the interest we've got. Due to the high interest in the NIUFOS Open Day, we've now secured a suitable venue. So remember, on Saturday, the 11th of March, our society is holding its first open day for anyone interested in us or even expressing a wish to join our team. The details have now been slightly changed though. We had initially planned for an 11 a.m. start, but now we will meet at midday at the Accidental Theatre on Shaftesbury Square in Belfast. That is midday at the Accidental Theatre and Shaftesbury Square in Belfast. For some reason, I cannot pronounce that word at the moment. Maybe I need more tea or coffee or a caffeine boost, but it's a bit like a tongue twister at the minute. Don't know why. It's been a long day. And you will find Ed, Janice, Johnny and myself there with some of the equipment that we will use. For more details, further details, please contact us via our Facebook page. If you've already contacted us expressing an interest in the NIUFOS Open Day, then we will contact you very, very shortly indeed. Let us move now to the last part of our podcast, which is the calendar of astronomical events. And for the week ahead, we are sort of looking at, so let's say for today, the 25th, the close approach of the Moon and Uranus. Then on the 27th, we have the Moon at its first quarter, so it's starting to get bright again. A little bit bad for sky watching, but it's not the worst. The worst will be whenever it's at its full moon. And then the cluster IC 2581 is well placed for observation. Get yourself a good telescope or a pair of binoculars and you should be able to see that cluster. Followed by the 28th, it is the close approach of the Moon and Mars, the lunar occultation of Mars and the conjunction of the Moon and Mars. Quite a busy day indeed. We'll go on to the second day of March, the close approach of Venus and Jupiter, the conjunction of Mercury and Saturn, and the conjunction of Venus and Jupiter. And then finally, on the 3rd of March 2023, the Moon will be at its apogee and the Theta Carinae cluster is well placed for observation. Again, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Very much appreciated. I hope you made it to the end. This was a longer one than what we had planned. Not to worry, we'll try and cut some of the other ones down and try and keep it within the 45-minute range. But, you know, if things get interesting, it's hard to, it's easy to overrun on timings. I've been Christopher McMurray. You've been listening to the Close Encounters podcast. And until next time, keep watching those skies.